We are talking about the playoffs, and over the weekend we crowned champions in the CIAA and the SIAC. We'll rehash that a little later on, at least from the atmosphere perspective. Virginia State won over Fayetteville State, no surprise there. Tuskegee beat Fort Valley State, no surprise. So here's what we have. The top 7 get in. So we've been talking about the last 3 weeks, the rankings from Super Region 2. So here's what the committee came up with yesterday. They have West Alabama in at number 1. Now here's the key word to remember during this conversation, and that key word is the Gulf South Conference and how many teams they get in here.
Right.
Virginia State moved up 1 spot to number 2, so they are in. Wingate is number 3. They dropped a couple of spots. Bowie State, even though they were dormant last week, not in the championship game, they move up a spot to number 4. Delta State, West Florida, West Georgia, those 3 teams along with West Alabama are from the Gulf South Conference. They all get in. Delta State in the last week in the poll that counts, the Super Region 2 poll, they moved up 2 spots. West Florida moved up 4 spots. West Georgia dropped 3 spots because they lost to West Florida. So here are the questions we have. Now, look, we're HBCU game day. We talk about HBCU football, but I have some questions that reach beyond just HBCUs. All right, I'm going to throw these questions out for you. Let's talk about it here. Okay, so Tuskegee was ranked number 9 last week. Had they moved up to number 8, and by winning their conference championship, that would have put them in the earned access spot. Now, earned access means you won your conference championship. You are at least number 8. No one else in your conference is in front of you. You get to automatically, by rule, leapfrog into the number 7 spot. So Tuskegee won coming into the game ranked number 9. They did not move up to 8 at all. So we're going to have to hypothetically think that they stayed at number 9, I guess. So winning their conference championship and defeating Miles, a team that was ranked the week before by 30 points, was not worth moving up after you get the, not that the Miles victory would have moved them up, but that's what got them in there. But by defeating Fort Valley, it was a close game. It was 13-6, a defensive affair. Do you think it was okay that they just held their spot and they weren't able to move up?
So, I mean, in your head, in your heart, it sounds like, yeah, you want them to move up and be there. But, you know, when you look at the entirety of the situation where, you know, yes, they're 9-2, but according to the D2 committee, they are 7-2 because those 2 wins against those SWAC teams don't count. So you're down to 7-2, right? And then one of your losses was to Finlay, who I believe is in the playoffs in their Super Region. I think they're in Super Region 1, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Super Region 3. But they are in there, but they lost to them 61-0. So when you lose to a team 61-0, right, especially one that is in the playoffs, they're looking at that curve. So when you lose to them like that, you beat Miles pretty good, but you didn't really play that great against Fort Valley State, and they weren't that great. You know, there were a couple other games where they barely eked out. You eke out a win against Morehouse. They were only 2-2. According to Chuck Bittner's records from D2football.com, they were 2-2 against teams with winning records. Okay, so,
let me jump in right here. Then why put them in the number 9 spot if they weren't all that to begin with? Why even get them into the top 10? And I'm going to parlay this, no pun intended, with Tuskegee. I'm going to parlay this into my second question. So Catawba was number 6 last week. They won their game. They won the last 4 games they played. So we have to think that if Tuskegee stayed at 9, because obviously they didn't move up to 8, because then they would have got the earned access spot, or heck, maybe Tuskegee moved backwards for all we know. But Catawba had to go from 6 to at least number 8. So Catawba just dropped 2 points, 2 spots for GP. Like, what did they do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think Chris Ferguson had said that technically they weren't using earned access. It's like mystical almost. as to whether
I've seen it written.
Okay, so you've seen it written where there is earned access. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in every other playoff system in the world, from my understanding, if you win your conference, you're in the playoffs. So I really don't even know the rationale for it. But I think if you look at the eyeball test, and again, I was just looking at those numbers. If you look at the numbers, you could kind of see where they would fall a little bit short.
Okay, but here's where they screwed up. This is whatever you do, especially now. I mean, this isn't 1987. This is 2017.
Even 1970.
There's a song there. The first thing that you have to do is you have to consider, how do the optics of this look? All right. So if West Florida was all that, and I'm not saying, or if West Georgia, or West Georgia, well, no, West Florida.
West Side?
West Florida. If West Florida was all that in a bag of chips, okay, go ahead and put them in there. But to have them to go from number 10 to number 6 in the last week, the week that really counts, and they're jumping over people who didn't lose, and you're going to give them 4 spots. Optically, how does that look, Steven? It looks like if I was at the door, okay, at a nighttime establishment, I said, Steven, stand right here, just stand right here. And then I let all these people in. Then I'd say, okay, doors are closed. Nobody else is coming in. Steven, come on. You're with me. I mean, you just can't do the +1 in the last week, because it's okay. If you're going to say, all right, all these Gulf South teams are good and they deserve to be in there, I'll give you that. They are good teams. They beat the SIAC in a lot of games straight up this year. But don't give me that, oh, yeah, let's give them 4 spots in the last week. Go ahead and put them where they're going to be.
I guess maybe they just didn't want people coming at them for all of those weeks. I don't know. Right? I guess they were just stringing us along just so, and it's like, so we won't be talking about all year about how they're not treating the HBCUs properly and how they don't want 3 HBCUs in a 7-team field that's going to determine, largely who gets to the national championship, part of who gets to the Final Four and to the national championship game for the Division II.
Well, so, they had no business putting Tuskegee at number 9, and
they were playing with their emotions
in a position. I mean, just look at how that set those kids up. Like, okay, all we got to do is get the number 8. We win, we're going to get in, and then you pull the rug out from under them. I mean, just don't even put them in that position.
What's the old school term? Selling wolf tickets? Yeah, they.
All right, let's talk about this committee, because it's not a mythical committee. Actually, there are real people on this committee, and the NCAA has made an effort to have representation from all conferences. So if your conference is in the super region, their thought is you need to have 2 representatives from your conference to be on the committee who makes these decisions. So here we go. We have Rick Baker from Mars Hill, Dick Christie from UNC Pembroke. We have Daryl Dickey from West Georgia, Brett Gillen from West Alabama, George Knox from Winston-Salem State, Reginald Ruffin from Miles, Willie Slater, head coach, just like Coach Ruffin, Tuskegee, he's on the committee, Curtis Walker from Catawba, and Damon Wilson from Bowie State. So you have representation from the CIAA and the SIAC, but when you have these committees and they're talking about who's going to get in, when they start talking about your team, you can't be there. So you can't be on the conference call or be in the room, because obviously you're going to feel some type of way talking about your own team. So, I talked to Coach Slater after the game, and he felt confident, but he wasn't like it's a lock. He was like, yeah, I feel pretty good that we'll get in. I'm not going to get super excited about it. And at the time, I didn't even know he was on the committee because I hadn't done my research yet. But he told me, he said, yeah, we got a meeting about it in the morning, so we'll see. And I didn't even think about what he was talking about. I thought he was talking about like a meeting with the team or something. Like, he was having the meeting about who's getting in. So I would just, in Division I, the way they do this, it's fully transparent. Like when they do this, the FBS thing. They're on the radio. They're on ESPN every week talking about the votes, and they got this panel with Condoleezza Rice and all these people on it, and they talk about, we felt this way and that way. So at least you can kind of follow their logic. But, Division II doesn't get that type of attention. So all we know in our minds is, there's a smoke-filled room and the ballot comes out and it's like, okay, boys, here it is. And you're like, what? What? So, our fans on Facebook were fired up. Like, oh yeah, I think people that don't even like Tuskegee were mad, and they were caping up for Tuskegee. So, Stephen, one of the things that we saw a lot of were, hey, we need our HBCU playoff. Forget the NCAA. Let's do our own thing.
We got our own thing.
I like it, but how could you do it? Like, realistically,
you'd have to leave the NCAA.
We've had that conversation.
Yeah, there's some
guys out there that want to help you do that.
There's a little part, those 4 little letters. They kind of, it's like the IRS, just like the CIA. Couple letters usually stop you from doing things, and so they would have to leave. I don't see it. That situation, but yeah, for a playoffs, that's what you'd have to have. Especially, even if it's only going to be D2, or if you're going to make it all over, D2 and D1 or whatever.
We all want to go back in our time machine, and I see it in the thread when Alabama State was in the SIAC, and FAMU was in the SI. Like, all these teams were together in the same conference before they started, glowing up and growing up, but. We're going back there. It makes people happy, but look, it hurt Tuskegee. Those two SWAC games did not help them at all. They beat 2 Division I teams. It did not help them at all, except for whatever money they made because the fans showed up at the game. But it's not going to help the D1 teams trying to make it into playoffs or win conference championships. It can hurt them. But again, they're like, hey, our fans want it so we can make money. So it's really a catch-22. It's a popular thing, but is not good for you. It's almost like a cigarette. It's like, people like it. They get some sort of thrill out of it, but it's like
swag cigarettes.
By the way, this is bad for your health. It's bad for your playoff chances going up and down, whether you're in D1 or D2, even if the fans love it.
Yeah, that's the thing we deal with all the time. Is the crossing. It's in the system that we have. It's the at D1 gets the spoils, and everything's money. It takes more money to be D1 than it does to be D2. And, because of that, some schools, they have the money and the budget, and they've, been in this situation, and they've decided they wanted to be Division I. It's more advantageous for them. And other people have said, hey, you know what? We're just going to stay in D2. We're going to try to do the best that we can here. Well, we can't afford it. We ain't paying $5. So shout out to Martin for that. But
the episode where all the heat was turned off.
I ain't paying $5.
And Gina thought the rent had gone up by $500. It was like $500. $5.
Yeah. So they ain't paying the $5, and and because of that, HBCU sports are kind of fractured. Even though they. Look, it's just like in North Carolina where, we're from, Winston-Salem State, North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T, Fayetteville State. All their students, for the most part, come from pretty much the same areas. They all know each other. And you feel like these schools are so natural to play each other. But because of the difference in the NCAA and divisions, it makes it tougher than, it makes it a little bit more complicated than that, or that many of the fans would like to think. And, the only other solution would be for the D2 schools to move up, which, most of them can't afford. Hell, half the D1 teams can't really afford to be there. Or for the D1 teams to say, hey, you know what, we're just going to go down back a level and be something that's a little bit more economical, but we're not going to get as much money or as much exposure, but we got a better chance at winning. So I don't think you're going to see either of those happening in mass anytime soon. So, it's not, but you're caught in between the sizzle and the steak.
Yeah, I mean, look, as the kids say, I hate saying this word, but it's just appropriate. The most lit, quote unquote, game I went to this year was Tuskegee, Alabama State. I'm not saying that was the most lit game of the year, but of the games I attended in the first week, that thing was packed. It was like homecoming on steroids. Like, it was a great environment. Seats were packed. It was loud. It was a great game, great energy. I mean, but it didn't help either team strength of schedule and all that stuff that fans, don't care about until it comes back to bite you in the butt later in the year. Yeah.
Well, hey, for a long time, they had a long running game, the Turkey Day Bowl and Turkey Day Classic. And, they have, and they had that up until 2012. 2012 was the last year they had it with Tuskegee in it. And it was really popular, and it was a huge thing. 2012, after WSSU makes its run, Tuskegee decides that they want to make the run at the playoffs. And so that dies out. They still have the Turkey Day Classic, and we just reported a couple of weeks ago, they've been kind of, there's been a carousel, a merry-go-round of opponents.
I think they're playing the Sisters of the Poor this year, right?
They're playing Edward Waters.
Oh, I'm sorry, Edward Waters.
Shout out to Edward Waters, the NAIA Edward Waters. But yeah, they were supposed to play Cheney, and Cheney can't afford. They ain't paying the $5 to come down to Alabama. They said we ain't got it.
That's gonna be look. When I type in the headline for this week's podcast, it's gonna be "I ain't paying the $5" podcast.
Pay the $5. But yeah, so they've had that long-standing game, and Tuskegee gave it up because they won the playoffs. And every year since they did that, they've been in the playoffs. This year, they're not in the playoffs. So last night, I hypothetically I let my Twitter fingers get a little bit happy, and I know, but I did it on my account, and I said, hey, so now that Tuskegee's, not going to be in the playoffs, maybe Alabama State sends them that "Hey Big Head" text and tells Edward Waters they got a headache, and see if they can't get together and get back for this Turkey Day Classic.
Rubber match. Yeah.
So best. Can you sweep us? So, but no, it's interesting. We talk about that playoffs versus tradition. I think that's something that. Like you said, I don't think a lot of fans really get to now. Like, there's been people even today, even after we've said it for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Fans don't understand anything about how the rankings are decided. I mean, because a lot of fans don't even know what their team's record really is. They're like, "Hey, wait, we beat and we like no."
Yeah. So that's why we're here. We're gonna educate you. So we're gonna keep spreading the word. But yeah, it's definitely something that people are gonna be talking about for a long time.